So we know some of these goals are deliberately unattainable. What they want is a blank check on your wallet and a blank check on your freedoms and a blank check on the sovereignty of all of our nations.
Recently, I saw this documentary film called No Farmers, No Food. Featured in this documentary is Alex Newman from Liberty Sentinel, a world-renowned journalist. And boy, is there a big push? Has there been a recent push, especially out of the United Nations, to get you and me to eat the bugs? Alex Newman joins us now. Good morning to you, Alex.
Great to be here. Thank you, Joe.
Appreciate your time today. So let's start with Agenda 21. What is Agenda 21? And is it the same thing as Agenda 2030, or is 2030 the upgraded version of Agenda 21?
Agenda 21 is the UN's agenda for the 21st century. It's a 100-year plan to totally restructure life on the planet. In fact, the UN put together a handy summary. They said it was intended to be implemented by every person on Earth, and that it was going to lead to, in their words, a profound reorientation of all human society, unlike anything the world has ever experienced. So it's hundreds of pages dealing with the environment, with law, with governance, with family, education, healthcare, you name it. It's all part of Agenda 21. They actually tell you very clearly in Chapter 36 the way they're going to bring this about is by brainwashing your children in public schools. They even bring in the spirituality element, but it's not what you or I would consider to be spirituality. In fact, the UN's World Core Curriculum for their education program, the guy who wrote it, Assistant Secretary General Robert Mueller, actually said it was based on the teachings of Alice Bailey, who was the founder of the Lucifer Publishing Company, if that gives you a little hint about where they're going.
Wow.
And so Agenda 2030 is the more bite-sized program, right? You know how the Soviets used to have the 5-year plans. Think of Agenda 2030 as the 15-year plan for the UN. So they adopted this in 2015. The head of the General Assembly at the time called it the Master Plan for Humanity. Over and over and over, it says everyone is going to participate. Nobody is going to be left behind. And again, it deals with every area of your life. Goal number 10 calls for national and international wealth redistribution. Goal number 4 is about brainwashing your children. Goal number 3 is about healthcare and abortions and vaccines for everyone. So they've got a plan for every area of your life and every person on the planet. And it very much includes you must eat the bugs, because they don't think beef and the normal food that we have grown accustomed to is sustainable. A lot of the goals that they put in there, the Agenda 2030 is actually made up of what they call 17 sustainable development goals, and there are 169 targets under those. Some of these are obviously and very deliberately unattainable. We're going to end poverty. Okay, I mean, the Bible teaches that the poor will be with us forever, right, until the end of the age, until Christ comes back. So we know some of these goals are deliberately unattainable. What they want is a blank check on your wallet and a blank check on your freedoms and a blank check on the sovereignty of all of our nations.
Are they all buying into this? Are there any resistors in that group at all? I'm just curious.
Are there resistors? There are governments that have no intention of following through on any of this stuff, right? And communist China is, of course, a premier example of this. But the issue, Joe, is that all the Western leaders know this too, right? They're shutting down our power plants. They're shutting down our energy extraction, our oil refineries, knowing full well that the communist Chinese are then going to pick up all of the businesses, all of the manufacturing, all of the factories that are going to have to flee the United States, Canada, Europe, Japan, as we shut down our industries. So this is very deliberate. You know, I was in at the UN climate conference in Paris in 2015, same year they adopted Agenda 2030, when they came up with the Paris Agreement on climate. And what this was Obama administration unilaterally pledging to slash our CO2 emissions by almost 30%. For perspective, wow. we exhale CO2. And the communist Chinese saying, we're going to continue growing our CO2 emissions indefinitely, far into the future. Maybe 2030, we'll think about peaking. So if you actually believe that CO2 is a toxic pollution, which is preposterous, but if you actually believe that, like the UN claims, the worst possible thing you could do in the world is shift economic production from the United States over to China. Every unit of economic output in China releases drastically more CO2 into the atmosphere than that same unit of economic production in the United States. We use natural gas, we use nuclear power, right? A lot less CO2 coming out of American power plants than China, where everything is done basically with coal-fired power plants. So if you really believe CO2 is bad, the worst thing you could do is do what they're doing, and yet they're all clapping like trained seals as if this was going to save the planet. That's how one of the ways that you know that this whole thing is a fraud. Communist China, since they already have communism, they don't have to implement a lot of this stuff. we in the United States, we have to submit. We have to give up our freedoms, our quality of life, and of course, our self-government.
How much of danger are we actually facing in our food supply in the United States?
Well, the food supply globally is under major threat. In fact, I started reporting on this over 10 years ago, and I wasn't immediately connecting the dots, but I heard the president of South Africa singing in front of the military, "Bring me my machine gun. We're going to shoot all the farmers, all the Boers." So like, what kind of idiot says we're going to shoot the farmers? I mean, we have to eat. Then you go to Brazil. They're confiscating hundreds of thousands of hectares. They're literally wiping villages off the map under the guise of giving some land back to some Indians. I actually called up the Indians, the Xavante Indians who were supposed to get all this land back. I used to live in Brazil. And they said, that's not our land. We're Indians of the Floresta, the forest, not the Cerrado, the kind of like, I don't even know what you would call it, savanna area. That's not even our land. We don't want that. Then you look in the United States, they're chasing down cattle ranchers. You look at what happened with the Bundy Ranch. You look at the Netherlands. You look at Canada. They're waging a war on our food supply. And it's very deliberate, right? And it hasn't manifested itself in the United States yet. The United States produces so much food. It's very difficult to sabotage completely our food systems. But other parts of the world are already starting to experience famine, and that's going to get a whole lot worse. And that will then be a pretext to bring in more controls. They'll say it was because of climate change. They'll say it was because we're not sustainable and we need to submit to the UN if we want to eat.
There are plants that have already been built that are trying to push this bug protein. And so we're already seeing products hit the shelves. So is there a growing demand for bug protein in America?
Nobody wants to eat bugs. It's just ludicrous. I mean, how many people do you know who want to eat a cricket sandwich, or CNN was promoting cockroach meals? It's ridiculous. But there is a plan. In fact, in 2013, I got a report from the UN Food and Agriculture Organization, which incidentally is run by a Chinese communist. This was sent to me by a source within the UN. Said, Alex, this is going to be important. You need to write about this. So I did. And at the time, people were like, what? That's ridiculous. And they said in there, we're going to have to convince Western people, because other people will be less difficult to convince. But we're going to have to convince Western people to eat bugs. We're going to do it by brainwashing their kids in the public schools. We're going to use it by bombarding them with media, encouraging them to eat bugs because they're healthier, they're good for the planet. And we're facing that right now. Our kids are being told that eating bugs is the food of the future. All of the government-funded propaganda in Britain, Canada, United States, they're pushing this idea that we need to eat bugs. And right now, probably not a lot of people want to eat bugs. When their kids are hungry, they might submit to it.
I think it's a pretty scary proposition to see world governments collude in order to give you one choice and one choice only, and that is you're not allowed to have your old beef steaks anymore. You now have to go to these other types of proteins, and I think we should be very concerned with that. We shouldn't stand around and just watch that happen, right?
We should absolutely be very concerned about that. I mean, agriculture is critically important. John Kerry, the climate czar, running around whining about the agriculture contributes 33% to global emissions. And it also contributes 100% to the global food supply. So, this is pretty important. And the idea that cows or steak or beef is bad for the planet is patently ludicrous. In fact, beef is very healthy for the human body, and cows are very healthy for the environment. I mean, before we had cows across the plains in the United States, we had buffalo, right? What's the difference? The idea that cows are going to destroy the planet is simply ludicrous. This is a tool for control. They want to completely dominate the food supply with these fascist kind of public-private partnerships, government in bed with mega corporations. And right now, as we speak, Joe, they're building some of the biggest insect protein factories in the world, in the United States and Canada. I suspect they know something that your average American doesn't, because again, there's no demand from the public for eating bugs, but still they're building it. And also, of course, these 3D printed meats, lab grown meats that are just vile, disgusting concoctions. This stuff is very dangerous.
One of the things I learned as we're running out of time here, but one of the things I learned about this documentary film that kind of broke my heart was the rate of suicide with these Dutch farmers.
Yeah, and it's not unique to the Netherlands either. I mean, in India, you've had this massive wave of suicides going back some years now. You have major corporations coming in, getting these people dependent on genetically engineered frankenseeds, and then basically bankrupting them. So you have suicides all over the place. They're kind of separate issues. You have on the one hand, when people lack God, when people don't have a relationship with God, they become much more susceptible to dangers like suicide in the face of adversity. But of course, a lot of this is driven by evildoers at the international level in national governments who are deliberately destroying these people.
Did you like that video?
It's okay. You can admit it. It's perfectly fine. Hey, we cover the big stories of our day, from inside the church to outside the church to all points in between, and we do it from a Catholic perspective. It's called A Catholic Take. It's a radio program Monday through Friday. We live stream it right here on this channel, by the way, so make sure to subscribe, like, and share. We would be very grateful to you. And don't forget, you're going to want to watch this video right here because you don't want to miss anything.